I have the pleasure of introducing two impressive fellows to you and introducing another fun topic of discussion, work, life, and human relationships in the context of AI. We'll start with Vinay Gidwaney, Chief Product Officer at One Digital, where he focused on employee benefits, financial services, and HR, kind of translating those into retaining our employees, which we're all very interested in doing right now, giving those employees a sense of security, making it easier for them to stay comfortable and stick around, and focusing on elevating performance to the highest level. So before that, he founded Maxwell Health, an innovative startup also. In fact, I think the buyers described it as such when they bought it. He sold it to, oh, help me, you sold it. Big insurance company, to a giant insurance company, Sun Life, is that right? Did I remember that right? Okay. Was head of technology at CIC Health. I liken that to a COVID first response team. Is that a fair characterization? Helping Massachusetts deal with a hopefully once in a generation situation there. That was all under an umbrella of Broad Institute, which is a collaboration between MIT and Harvard, I think, right? Board member at Design for Change USA, focused on education and social justice. We certainly at Space Camp relate to both of those topics. So. And sits on numerous advisory boards for other startups, and inclusive of our alumni board, yes? So please, I'll have you guys come up as I introduce you. So please welcome Vinay Gidwaney. Oh, my pleasure. All right, not to be outdone, let me read through Dr. Kulin's resume for you real quick. Dr. Robb Kulin, CIO at Shift4 Payments. He was an advisor to Stoke Space. Serves on the board of directors at Alaska Health South Sudan. Began his career at SpaceX, if you've heard of SpaceX. We have a couple of things out here in our atrium from SpaceX. He reached launch chief engineer and notably oversaw the first successful Falcon 9 landing. I sent my son to a launch and probably wouldn't have watched the launch if he hadn't have been there. But the first time I saw those things land, it was like for me, I'm old enough to have been wowed by the space shuttle. It was like the space shuttle landing all over again. Like, I can't believe this. This is amazing. So that is a big piece of history for me. Former NASA astronaut candidate. That's a tough gig to get. Chief engineer and COO at Firefly Space. Sought after consultant for international space strategies and private space initiatives. Commercial pilot, and before all that, in case you weren't impressed by this point, worked in Antarctica as a climate researcher and ice driller. So please help me welcome Dr. Robb Kulin to the stage as well. I'm going to get onto that one, and I am going to.
All right, how's everyone doing? Great, all right. So we're at Space Camp and we'll finish off with a little space stuff, but right now we're gonna talk about the payments industry. So I'm CIO at Shift4 Payments, which is the company that was founded by Jared Isaacman, who had the Inspiration 4 mission and is going up soon again this summer to do the first private spacewalk. And so what is Shift4 Payments? Well, Shift4 Payments it's a publicly traded payments company, and we service about 33% of the restaurants you visit, 40% of hotels, and about 40% of major league venues. We recently facilitated the payments for the Super Bowl, and that was a pretty big moment for us. I think as most people are going for the teams, we were like, yeah, transactions are going through, it's working. And our mission really in general is to enable commerce and to do that globally. Our primary areas of focus are the US and now Europe, We're expanding into Canada, LATAM, and really going more and more global, but we do payments or facilitate them across borders internationally. Last year alone, we processed about 3.5 billion transactions worth over $225 billion. So when it comes to AI though, like what are we trying to do with it at Shift4? Well, as I mentioned before, our whole vision is to enable commerce, and so we want to use AI to enable commerce. And how we do that is improve our merchant experience. Now, if you think about it as a merchant or a customer of really any company, your experience is increased by your interactions with that company and the products you use. So in our case, we're facilitating that by increasing the efficiency for our merchants and our customer support, empowering our employees, improving our employee fulfillment internally, and in producing new product offerings. And so it's a lot of different areas that we can incorporate, and I'm pretty excited about kind of the frontier we have ahead of us. So who am I? I guess you guys already heard a lot of this. It's a little embarrassing to hear sometimes. You're like, wow, really? Okay. But I'm the CIO at Shift4 Payments, which is not my background at all. But Jared brought me in and wanted to try to change things up a little bit with some actual SpaceX thinking, is how he put it. And it's been a wild experience learning a new field and trying to look at the whole IT space as more of a systems engineer, which is more of my background. You can see me there with Jared, Space Launch Control Center, back when we were having fun there. And then, as he mentioned, the landing there with Elon, and then if you know Hans Lee and Shauna as well, kind of some of the other leadership at the time who helped make that happen. It was a really, really amazing day. And if you guys haven't ever seen a Falcon 9 land, I do recommend going to see it. It's like sci-fi. And if you go for a heavy mission, it's really like sci-fi, seeing them both come back at the same time. I actually didn't get to see it until after I'd left because I was always in the control room. And I was just totally blown away. So super fun times. The rest of my background though, it's all aerospace. I was COO and chief engineer at Firefly, which is a small space startup out of Austin, and then a NASA astronaut candidate before some family stuff unfortunately got in the way. So let's launch into the AI side of things though. So what are we going to talk about today? Of course, we're talking about work-life. That's our main topic of the session. And so how do we incorporate it across the AI environment at Shift4? Assisting our support agents with AI, who are really some of our hardest working team members and one of our largest groups. A mission control initiative, which is something fun I'm happy to share with you. And then of course the challenges. We've heard a lot of them already in the sessions, and I'll highlight a few that we have on our spectrum. And then I can't help but finish, but a little bit of a look towards space, because I think we can also really change the approach of people doing space work as well. So AI really has the opportunity, I should say, to be in our corporate DNA across the spectrum. I'll admit we're very starting out in our AI journey, but we've got a few initiatives already. We recently launched a website construction tool for our merchants to be able to make their own websites leveraging AI. So basically you can make a website with AI-produced images, quick menu builds, really just like in a few minutes build your entire website for your restaurant, which is pretty exciting. Code development, like so many people, though there are risks, as we all know, that we're also dealing with. Menu builder, which is a big one for our internal team. Fraud analysis, I think someone already mentioned that in the security portion about how it's used in the payments world. IVR, right? Voice recognition when you call into customer support. These are some of the areas we're already using it, but really across the board, we have so many different areas that we can leverage AI to help out the company. So our first initiative, though, was super simple. I mean, we all have access to ChatGPT, and it's gotten a little more sophisticated since then, but our first pilot was really to leverage something as simple as that on non-secure items, really a restaurant menu. They're out there on the internet already, to help our employees build menus, to be able to put them in the point of sale system for those merchants quickly. And the time savings was huge. On average, a really good programmer could do one of those menus in about 45 minutes. Now it's like 5 to 10 minutes for a first draft. There's still iterations, it takes longer, and we're continuing to refine the process, but huge gains by a really simple AI tool. It completely changed how those people's jobs are at work. And as I mentioned before, another big group that we want to be able to help out is our support agents. And this is an area that we're I'd say really just delving into. And it's pretty common in many industries out there, but it's something that we want to take very carefully. But these are some of the areas that we want to target with them. So, someone calls in, how do you know you're talking to the right person? You want to authenticate them seamlessly, right from your voice when you pick up the phone. Who is this person, right? So, if you're calling to someone there, let me look back through all your records and try to understand, who you are, what's going on. Well, that just shouldn't be a long process. We want that 360 view of who a customer is to be right up front. And AI, of course, does a really good job of summarizing that kind of information and parsing through, cases of people calling in, what their current status is on processing, how long have they been with the company, what hardware do they have, what kind of merchant are they, all sorts of stuff, and can summarize that quickly for an agent. Sentiment analysis, how is the call going? Of course, we talked about voice recognition, but what's the person feeling? And should that agent be encouraged to be more empathetic? Does a supervisor need to step in and try to help out? And should they be alarmed? Sentiment analysis is a really good tool that can help these people out quite a bit. Interactive knowledge. We have people calling in across, I think, 9 different verticals that we service. And for both huge merchants such as Legion Stadium, as I mentioned earlier, down to your pizza shop down the street. And so it means that there's a lot of information for support agents to know. And we want to make sure that they're able to get that knowledge quickly. And AI, again, can assist with that. But not only get the knowledge on how to help someone, but how to actually take direct action. So be able to pair actual action empowerment to do something to help a merchant directly with that suggested knowledge. And then lastly, we probably don't think about this because we hang up the phone. Our part's done, hopefully. Things are fixed. But for an agent that's still been helping you, or when you call into a customer support center, that person has to go through and do some sort of summary. Try to make sure that the next time you call in, it's clear what you called about, how did the call go, what they're able to do for you, and that also should be easy and quick. We have, of course, the voice recording of the call. We have the actions that they took on their computer. So many things can be quickly summarized by AI and save that person time. Looking at this in a little more detail from just a basic support workflow, we mentioned about, how does this start, right? It's getting that customer data. That means going through all your CRM systems, your knowledge base, what equipment do they have? Again, are they mom and pop shop, huge company, or a large enterprise? Are they Starlink? Is this an international company that's doing payments globally? Are they card present or card not present? That's a big thing in our industry, a big difference. Try to create a summary out of all that. Give the agent right where they need to be on a knowledge standpoint of who this customer is, and then put that up front. Then, as the agent has issues and has to help the person solve, proactively offer solutions or allow the agent to Q&A an AI bot to be able to get to knowledge more quickly. And of course, I mentioned summarize the call, but not only summarize it, again, we want to minimize clicks here. We want to make this easy for people. Take that call, summarize it, and be able to post that directly in the record so that it is there for the next time someone calls in. Just looking at a couple pilots of how we're addressing these. Customer 360, again, is make a train query, start going through all the customer data, summarize that query information that's referenced. Of course, we can do the long summary, so you might reference 5, 10 different cases of a merchant's been having issues, down to just a couple. And then a summary of what's their current status. Are they processing? Is the merchant's equipment working correctly as far as we can see? Are we able to flag something right out of the gate? Let's put that right in front of agents. That's kind of what a customer 360 would look like. So that's the support agent side. But I also want to dive into something that's really fun here and influenced by the space side. And so when Jared and I were talking, Jared again is the CEO, he's talking about his experience in SpaceX, and he's seeing mission control, right? He's seeing this team that just came together, that's proceduralized, they're making quick actions, they've got the data at their fingertips to do good things. He's super impressed by that, and he's like, how do I bring that to Shift 4? Well, the concept of mission control is you have a team that's trained really well in their specified areas to take actions, but to take those actions, they need to know what is the status of systems, what's going on. That means alerting and actioning are both key functions of a mission control system. So we're trying to also build that out at Shift 4 for all of our company operations across the board. And AI is actually going to be a big piece that'll help facilitate small pieces of that. So identifying the off-nominal indicators, there's of course a lot of both machine learning and AI tools that can help us with that. generating thresholds, iterating and escalating, both automatically and through manual actions, and then directly address those. So what does this product actually look like internally? Well, a lot of different things can pop up. These are all potential issues that someone might be seeing when they're looking at a mission control console. This is what we call our outage control module. And what someone would then do is pick one of these that's actually a real problem in the mission control center, identify it, select it, add key details to it, problem statements, links to any key known procedures, and from this point, we're starting to narrow down and put information and contacts for AI to help us out. So we're going to triage it, make sure we know or help identify exactly what areas it's applied to, and then we're going to say, okay, we need to communicate this. We need to get people riled up inside the company to address it, and we also need to put out a notice to our merchants. So that's where AI comes in first. It's going to actually suggest that communication. It's going to go back through previous communications that we've sent out internally and externally and help pull together a suggested message to get out the door quickly. And it's actually really cool. It helps the team pull it together a lot quicker than we have in the past, and more often than not, our marketing team can look at it for the external and say, good to go, which is pretty exciting. But as I mentioned, someone needs to look at it, so we'll review it, review the communication suggested. We don't just want to let AI generate it and send it out the door, but once it's there, maybe we make an edit or two, it's out, and that message is put out to the team internally and our external merchants quickly. I already mentioned the edit piece, so we'll skip that. Then we got to figure out what are we going to do about this. We've got the team notified. So what are the actions going to take? AI can actually help us here as well. There's all the knowledge base in the company, the procedures of how to fix things, previous actions that have been taken on other issues that have popped up, and we can leverage AI to parse through all of that, take in the data that we've put in the beginning, and actually suggest an action plan to the issue at hand. However, similar as before, we're always going to review and edit, make sure it actually makes sense with the subject matter experts in the Mission Control Center to be able to make sure we're taking the appropriate action. But once that's there, we're going to start executing, just like we would in the space world. Start stepping through those problems, problem solving, iterate as we need, of course, to be able to, with new data coming in. But we're going to keep moving forward with that suggested plan. And then lastly, we end up with a lot of data. This is a log of actions taken during a simulated outage, and a lot of things can go on. And so how do you put that back in a retrospective? Well, and we solve things permanently, actually in a corrective action of sorts. Again, this is AI can help out in summarizing a lot of those tools, and summarizing a lot of the actions taken, and be a great tool. So that's been something really fun that we've started to delve with on the AI front. But all these things, of course, have a lot of challenges. Seamless user experience. Again, I don't want someone to have to do a lot of copy pasting. Hopefully it's like AI is right at their fingertips in an omni-channel experience, tied in directly between ERP systems, CRM, Slack, text messages, whatever it is on the platforms that they're using, it's already there, and minimize the external copy paste. Model training. How to ensure the model is producing the correct solution and continues to do so. For those of you who have worked in like ChatGPT, for example, they update their model regularly, and that can actually affect the results. So you want to make sure that you can sometimes lock down, if you're relying on this for a specified solution or repetitive solution, that you're going to continue to get the right results and have a good method to QA that. We don't have the best answers yet, but we're working through it. The other thing too is continuously monitor the landscape of ever-changing problems. So things are going to be coming up, content's going to be changing. Again, monitoring the response and trying to do solid QA on that. And from a software standpoint, how does that fit into our SDLC, both for checking the actual response of models that we're using, but also like if we're generating code, this was brought up yesterday in the security aspect, are you making sure that code is being properly reviewed in your software development lifecycle? And then lastly, of course, and I think one of the biggest issues that we all have is data security. So external models, there's obviously been some leaks that have surfaced recently in the news. Internal models can also be tricked for incorrect information to get access that someone shouldn't have, and we need to stay within certain standards like PCI, SOX, GDPR, some pretty serious standards out there. Getting good data security and solving some of these problems requires a really good data architecture, and that's actually requiring a lot of work on our end to make sure that we clean that up as well for areas where we roll this out. And then there's, from a just work-life perspective, there's a lot of everyday use that I think those of us in the corporate world potentially struggle with. So if anyone's logged into a Zoom meeting or something similar, you'll often hear, this meeting's being recorded. And that meeting's often being recorded and then transcribed. There are a lot of meetings out there that might be on a secure subject. You don't want that transcribed. That just puts you further at risk of something being breached. Or something be taken out of context or incorrectly transcribed. Like, these are actually pretty big problems that we have to worry about in every single workday scenario. And then lastly, code security. When you're using commercial off-the-shelf coding assistants, checking for open source code, and again, performing SDLC code checks. So data security is definitely a huge, huge concern in an area that we're going to be very cautious in. We're trying to do AI primarily in areas of with only having access to data that isn't super secure at this point. But let's dive into, I think, one of my favorite topics out there since we are at Space Camp, which what about AI in the space workspace? So AI has a ton of different opportunities, and I do very little work in the space world anymore. I am an advisor still for Stoke Space, but sadly don't get a play there as much as I used to. But AI has a huge potential for impact across all verticals of space, from launch to in-space, general operations, regulations, across the board. And frankly, I believe that for the US to continue to be the dominant space player and to accelerate our exploration of the solar system and humankind, it's actually imperative that we leverage the tools at our disposal, including AI, to the maximum extent possible. Because if we don't, others will, right? And also, this is an accelerator of the mind. So we should be using it to help us do things that are very cool sooner. So I just put a little bit of thoughts out there on where could I see that right now if I was working at a space company full-time still? One, accelerating design. I think we can probably all find a few areas that you can imagine doing that. But honestly, some that we might not think about are reducing the burden of design documentation. For any engineers out there, documentation's a lot of work. And AI can be pretty good at summarizing content and pulling that together. Using AI to even construct components or systems from given boundary conditions as a starting point in a design. Materials optimization and research. We heard about, of course, looking for new drugs and stuff. I think yesterday, using AI on large data models, you can do the same thing with materials, I believe. Failure modes and effect analysis. If you, with the right boundary conditions and prompts, could actually load a system into an AI tool and have it start giving you a first round of failure modes and effects. It's actually often a small team going through an entire vehicle or even ground system trying to do that analysis takes a lot of time. Fast operational data analytics. This is actually something we used to do at SpaceX, just machine learning for fast turns. I've never even heard of turns on, say, test and launch recycles as we used to be able to do there, and in large part that was facilitated by machine learning. And I think we can do even more on that front, leveraging AI, looking at larger data queries and potentially things that we're not seeing across relationships. On-orbit maneuvering and exploration, anonymous rovers, right, that are actually thinking for themselves. I think that's a great one. Or even satellites get a little scarier because if we screw up Earth orbit and put a big debris field out there, it's a really big problem. We got to keep some smart tabs on that one. But I think AI could still be pretty smart there the way that it is in a lot of our vehicles. It's a high risk and reward environment, right? So we just talked about on orbit. And as a consequence of that being such a high risk environment, that actually comes with us having to sometimes do a more strict, better job. And so if you were to think, for example, how could I human qualify a spacecraft that was partially controlled by AI? That's going to push us to a new level of rigor and standards that we probably wouldn't necessarily address otherwise. And so I think there's actually some indirect I'd say benefits from AI getting more in the space environment. Who here has actually worked in an industry with a ton of regulations? And just maybe raise a hand real quick. I've worked in a few, they're terrible, but normally built in blood, so to speak. there's, whether you're in the payments industry or in space, there are volumes of regulations, and they're often conflicting, contradictory, and sometimes very often redundant. And at least in some cases, you get to tailor them. That means you get to tailor those regulations and push back and get approval, saying that you're going to not completely follow the exact word, but you're going to follow the intent in this way. That's actually something that I also think AI can help a lot with, having done that activity pretty extensively previously. In the space world, 91710 is a huge Air Force manual. RCC 319, it's how you make sure that you're doing autonomous flight termination correctly. These are large volumes with literally line-by-line regulations that you have to follow, and a lot of them can be consolidated. A lot of them can be actually mapped back to how you're meeting them. There's just a lot of consolidation that can happen there. And also on the regulation standpoint, for those who might have exposure again to the space industry, international trade is actually very difficult for American companies due to ITAR regulations. However, we have competitive companies globally who are working in the same technological space and don't have those restrictions. And I think a way that we could also use large language models in part is for some of the upcoming reconfiguration of the ITAR regulations. So actually going back through those, trying to clean them up, modernize them, use them to look for gaps, look for also comparisons to other policies on the same issue to help American companies be a little more competitive in the international trade space for space items as well. Diving more, and we're going to finish this up here pretty quick, diving more into just back to kind of the fundamental design part. From the design engineer, you also have to worry about those regulations. So using AI to consolidate and make sure you understand what really applies to you. In the design standpoint, we talked about that in more detail earlier. But on the manufacturing side, there's opportunities there. Image analysis for machines to be able to act on, optimized manufacturing flows, scripting coding for manufacturing, voice control machinery, though that one kind of scares me. An assistant writing complex manufacturing instructions. A manufacturing instruction for a rocket or a spacecraft can be immensely long, and I'm sure that's the same case in a lot of large complex systems. QA is probably one of our biggest opportunities for AI to help out in the workplace in AI, or in aerospace. Testing test case gaps. You write a ton of test cases trying to see if a rocket or a spacecraft is going to work correctly, or even the ground systems. And it's pretty interesting. We've actually done this at Shift 4 as well, where we've set AI to try to, we actually tried to say, here's our control cases, and or a set of test cases, and see if it can identify the control cases that we think are the redundant ones. And instead it came back and correctly identified that what we thought were redundant were actually not redundant for reasons that it explained. We were like, okay, that's actually correct. And then it identified 5 redundant ones in the cases that we thought were all different. So test cases like that can also be applied to the aerospace world. Responses for failures, image analysis for non-destructive testing, a lot of different areas. And then lastly, operations, fast knowledge lookup similar to our support agents, catching off nominal behaviors, even voice-controlled spacecraft. And for those of you thinking 2001 Space Odyssey, I'm sorry, Dave. And I'll close with this. It's a really fun quote I saw a little while back from Steve Jobs. And in his case, in 1990, he was talking about computers in general. We humans are tool builders. We can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind, something that takes us far beyond our inherent abilities. And I think we're just at the early stages of these tools, very early stages, when we've only come a very short distance. And it's still in its formation, but already we've seen enormous changes. I think that's nothing compared to what is coming in the next 100 years. That was 24 years ago, and I think now maybe we've hit the motorized era with AI. But look forward to what the next 75 are. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thanks, Rob. We are going to go from talking about AI in space to AI in HR. So exciting. So my name is Vinay Gidwaney. It's great to be here. I'm actually an alumni of Space Camp back in 1995, so I dated myself there. Two of my kids have been here. The third one, who's sitting over there in the corner, will come soon. And this is a uniquely interesting place because it is, as Greg sort of explained a little bit, the confluence of education, space exploration, and what I think is character development. And I'm going to bring that back to that topic in a few moments. My background is in startups. I've been a startup entrepreneur most of my life. I actually skipped that university thing, saved some money, and started companies early on in my career. Sold a couple of software companies, worked in healthcare, and during COVID, some of the vaccine deployments in Massachusetts and other places in the country. And now I work for a big insurance company, so that's super exciting. But I'll just explain why it's super exciting from a technology point of view, because I think it addresses one of the things that are, frankly, uniquely American. What's one thing, no matter what industry that you work in, whatever you do, whether it's flying rockets to space or working at a toll booth, you all have the unique American experience of having to work with HR. And we talk a lot about how artificial intelligence is going to change rockets, how it's going to change space, how it's going to change engineering, scientific discovery, medicine, and so on. But we don't often explain or talk about how AI is going to change the nature of work and change the nature of how we think of ourselves as employees. So that's what I'm going to do a little while is I'm going to explore some of those topics. I don't have any answers, but I'm going to pose some questions to hopefully get the conversation started. Right now, I work for a company called One Digital. I'm the chief product officer there. We're a pretty large 4,000-person HR benefits, retirement, and financial services company. Sounds super exciting. But we actually serve about 100,000 small businesses in the country and over 10 million American families in helping them become financially successful and stable. It's an important job that we do because we make sure that people get the support they need in their workplace and at home through financial services and benefits and insurance. And again, all of us have dealt with challenges there. So I'm at the center of trying to fix all those things. If you want to come and slug me later and tell me how much health insurance sucks, I can take it too, because we spend a lot of time trying to fix that. So let's talk about the AI-powered work and HR. So first of all, I want to explore a little bit about what's going on in corporate environments when it comes to AI. The first thing to recognize is that virtually, and this is a little bit of an older stat, I think, virtually every single company in America is thinking about how AI is going to impact what they do for their clients and their workforce. It is a universal thing that has taken over corporate America in a tremendous way. It is actually shocking. We talk to CIOs, we talk to business leaders, and up and down the industries, big or small, they're thinking about AI. And there's quite a bit of pressure from industry, especially if you're a public company or if you have investors, and trying to figure out what AI is going to do to your workforce, how you're going to deal with it. And I think that this is a little bit different. AI, as we've talked about, has been around for a long time. But right now, we're not talking about process automation. If I'm in the business of making cars, I've been using AI for a long time on my car factory floors, in the assembly line, in design, in engineering. But the difference now is that AI is going beyond process automation into knowledge generation. So knowledge generation is what we've thought to be a uniquely human characteristic, that now machines are able to do it, or seemingly do it enough to fool us that they're thinking that they can do it, which for all intents and purposes means they're doing it. Doesn't matter how the math works in the background, whether it's truly thinking for itself. If it makes us think that it is thinking for itself, then it is thinking for itself. And that has an impact. In fact, it's a threat to many businesses, or for some, it will be an opportunity. Any business that primarily relies on human ingenuity and creativity to deliver value to their customers is going to have to think about what generative AI has in meaning for their organization. And I actually think that, and these are some AI-generated imagery, I'm by no means an artist, but one of the things that I think about a lot is this concept of how we're moving beyond tools. In fact, that was a great quote at the end from Steve Jobs, thinking about technology and computers being the bicycle of the mind. Well, that bicycle is now turning into a Ducati. So it's a little bit different with how it's going to accelerate what we do in our minds. And in fact, we've always thought about the fact that we had control over these tools. We had a craft. And whether you were a blacksmith 500 years ago or somebody designing something with a computer, that the tool was within your control and it helped you achieve a particular outcome. Well, generative AI is going to change that relationship when it comes to tools. No longer is it do as I say, it is help me or assist me in achieving a specific goal. So it's work alongside with me, not for me. And if you can imagine that every modern workforce is going to have an AI agent alongside with them, working with them, not for them, to achieve a goal. So at my company, for example, we're very quickly, and we're not unique in this, in fact, many organizations are doing this, deploying AI agents. These are AI team members. I sometimes call them interns from Harvard without the snobbiness. My wife went to Harvard, so I can say that. So it's like an intern from Harvard who knows everything about the world, never sleeps, learns everything all the time, and you can ask it any question and have it help you with any task. What if you had interns like that on your team at any point in time available to you? That is a tremendous, powerful capability, and that is happening in corporate America today. So what I want to explore is what happens when we all have these team members? What does it mean to how we think about our work life? And specifically, let's explore 5 topics: experience and merit, individual contributors and team players, culture and diversity, performance and development, and leadership and hierarchy. So these are concepts that, again, all of us, I don't care where you work, how long you've been working, if it's your first job or you've been working for 40 years, you have dealt with all of these things in some capacity. And all of them are fundamentally going to change because of AI. So let's explore some of that. So first, let's start with experience and merit. So we've all read a job description, applied to a job, written a job description perhaps. All job descriptions have required skills and abilities and experience. When we promote somebody, we do it based upon the work that they achieved and the quality of their endeavors, right? Those are common things that happen in the workplace. So I'm going to describe 3 what-ifs, and we're going to do this for each topic. We're going to go for the most sort of predictable what-if to the most extreme what-if, and then talk about what would happen. So what if a promotion is based upon the work that was facilitated by you but not done by you? Okay, so if you went in for a promotion, you said, well, these things happened, I made something do it or asked something do it, but I didn't actually do it. What would happen with that promotion? Think about it. Like, would you be promoted? Is the other thing being promoted, or would you be promoted? Well, that's actually happening today, where people are harnessing AI to do things for them. Does that mean it's your work or their work? I don't know. Experience is not something gained through hard work, but through simulated apprenticeships. This is actually fundamentally changing education, where you can sit down and talk to ChatGPT and ask it a gazillion questions, but you can also have it shape an educational experience for you. So when I apply for a job and I say, well, I've had 5 years experience working in a certain workplace, well, was it really 5 years, or did I just simulate those 5 years through an interactive conversation with a chatbot that lasted 2 months? But it scrunched down the experience that I would have from 5 years, remove all the BS that happens in a workplace normally, just get to the heart of what you really do. Maybe it's 2 months of hard work that I condensed down into a relationship that I had with a bot that helped me learn those things. Is that experience? How do we think about that in a job application? Maybe a little bit more extreme is that merit is no longer based upon your own abilities, but the strength of your large language models. So how does that work with equity? How does that work with keeping things a fair game for employees? When one employee can have a better model than another one and do a better job, is that your abilities or is it their abilities? And how does that work when it comes to managing job expectations, merit, and experience? So we have to really rethink some of the things that we do, like how do we talk about job descriptions? I wouldn't be surprised if we see in a few years job descriptions actually explicitly call for your precise experience working with other humans to achieve the task, as opposed to working with AI to achieve it. We also have to consider what real-world experience is. Why not working with AI be better experience than working with other people? We know that it can sometimes be more effective. So why not make that more valid and treat it with merit? And the conditions for advancement need to change, because the nature of what we consider to be good work is going to change, and we have to think about how we promote people. All right, some things to think about when it comes to experience and merit. Let's talk about individual contributors and team players. So we've all been in this situation where you look across a workforce and you say, well, some of those people, he's really good as an individual. We all know an individual contributor when we see them, right? They're the ones who are kind of like, they're good to working over there and they're really awesome. They contribute to stuff. But when you put them in a team, it doesn't always work out. And then you have some other people that are amazing team players, right? They're able to communicate well. They're able to work effectively with other humans. That's a really great situation. And we often think about designing our organizations in these roles. We have teams, and we think about a team as a bunch of individuals working together to achieve a common goal. And then we have individual contributors responsible for one particular series of tasks that they need to go through. Okay, so now let's think about what happens when we throw AI in the mix. What if your ability to work with AI is better than your ability to work with other humans? So take that individual contributor and say, well, actually, you have 3 AI team members. Are they on a team? Or are they just an individual contributor? I don't know. Remember, these AI agents are not exactly what you see today, but they're going to function as autonomous workers in your environment. So we have to start to think of them as team members. And what happens if you work better with AI versus not? And we all know that there's some people that work better with computers than with humans. But what if a team is made up of with more humans, or maybe a mix between humans and AI? How do you think about the performance of that team itself? Furthermore, what if your personal performance is assessed based upon how well you work with AI versus how well you work with people? Are you a people person or are you an AI person? Sounds like a stupid question right now, but could we imagine that in 5 years? Absolutely. And if that's going to be in a job application of how much of an AI person are you, we're going to have to think hard about what that really means when it comes to how we assess people, right? Whether they are individually contributing, are they truly working alone? And how do we map social skills in the context of AI? HR executives and HR professionals think about social emotional skills, and they think about matching skills to jobs very carefully. Well, one of the challenges that they need to throw in the mix now is how people work with AI. Culture and diversity. So it's a big topic nowadays. Culture is what we think of as made up as the intangibles. We all know a culture, a good culture when we see it, and we know a bad culture when we see it. It's the traditions, the attitudes, the rituals, the things that happen within a company. And diversity is something that we're all working on, of course, DEI and other initiatives to promote equal opportunities and a diversity in background and thinking. So now what happens when we throw AI into it? So what happens when you have every organization has a culture of working hard and working smart. Whether they want to say that directly or not, most organizations have that somewhere in their sets of values. But what happens when you are able to do more by working less? How do we consider that when it comes to a culture? Would you join an organization that says, we want you to work a lot less, or it's actually okay to work a lot less, but use AI? Or would you be okay to have that mindset, but then be working in an environment where they really value grinding away? Why would you grind away if you can have AI do it for you? What does that mean to your culture? The shift between who knows how to use AI and who don't is what really drives diversity. So we think of diversity in the more traditional ways, race, ethnicity, background. But what if there's a larger divide between people who know how to use AI and people who don't know how to use AI? People who've grown up with AI, people who haven't. We see that technological divide all the time, but I think it's going to be more dramatic. And do we have to think about diversity when it comes to that? What about diversity of thinking for all the people who didn't grow up with AI? Is that different thinking that you value in your organization or you don't? Those are questions we have to answer. Here's a tough one. What if you have a bunch of AI agents out there doing things in your organization and they take on a certain voice or personality? We've all seen this, ChatGPT, Bard, Bing chat, it can have a personality. It can respond in a certain way. In fact, you can tell it to have a personality and it will respond in that way. Well, what if you have half your team is AI and the AI takes on a personality or has a personality programmed into them? How does that define your culture? What if they're a bunch of assholes? Do you have an asshole culture? Excuse my language. But that's real. That's a real issue that you have to worry about. So the question of AI and personality is a big issue when it comes to culture within organizations. So we have to start to think about how do we describe our culture, how culture is embedded in our systems. Never thought about that. We always thought about culture with our people, but what about our systems? And what do we really consider to be diverse thinking? Performance and development. Everybody's had a performance review. Everybody's maybe done a performance review. It's not the most enjoyable thing to do, but AI is going to make it more challenging. So now we've always thought about performance as sort of separating those who we sort of value in an organization and those who sort of don't fit in. And we've thought about development or professional development as how employers invest in their employees to grow their skills, to expand their careers and effectiveness. So now what if? Performance evaluations are done by AI. Well, this is going to happen pretty soon, if not already. Many of the AI HR systems that people use today are building AI into their workflows so that AI can certainly evaluate resumes, but also certainly evaluate your performance. But what if AI went an extra step and said, well, we're going to evaluate your performance, but every couple of days we're going to just nudge you along in trying to do a hyper-personalized learning plan for you. So all of us have taken our annual compliance training. You got to take your HIPAA training, your SOC training, your harassment training. We do it annually. We wait until the end. We get pinged by HR 15 times and we finally do it, right? Everybody done that? Well, what if HR was pinging you every single week, slowly adjusting your learning plan to make sure that you turn into that ideal employee, whatever they think that is? Well, that's possible with AI because it's going to equip learning and development programs to be very, very personalized. What if you had a performance review of your team, but they reviewed you, and then they reviewed your AI, and then they reviewed you together, like it's your teammate? What does that mean to you in your own thinking of value in your organization? Again, a little bit of an extreme, but you can imagine that being possible, where if we have these AI agents working alongside teams, that they really affect your own performance. So we have to rethink performance reviews and how we actually conduct them. We have to really rethink how we support managers to support their own employees. And we have to think about how we provide constructive feedback in career development. Maybe being hyper-personalized is not a good thing. Maybe others will take advantage of it and excel with it. We have to rethink how we deliver those programs. Now, finally, leadership and hierarchy. So we typically consider leadership the domain of humans leading other humans to achieve a shared objective. And we think of hierarchy sometimes as helping to make things run smoothly, help to build more command and control, oftentimes to drive a level of balance in accountability and autonomy amongst teams. Now, what happens if we throw AI in? So what if being a supportive manager means your boss uses AI to evaluate you? So you sent an email to your boss saying, hey, what do you think about this? Your boss's AI responds to you. Are they a boss? Do you feel supported by them? I don't know. Is that a true leader, or is that just somebody being efficient with their time? Something to think about. That's probably happening already, because I'm pretty sure your boss, when they get a tough email from you, copies and pastes it into ChatGPT to get a response and sends it to you. It happens all the time. It's going to happen more and more. So what does that make you feel as an employee of that boss? What if the decisions that you make as a leader are double-checked by your AI twin or your AI double? So imagine all of your emails are being read, all of your correspondence, all of your meetings transcripts are being read. And AI is constantly looking at the decisions that you make as a leader to manage your team, and then tells your boss whether you're doing a good job on that or not. Did AI tell you to do the right thing, or said to do one thing and you did another? How does that affect your leadership style or your effectiveness? So something to worry about. This idea of an AI twin is going to become more and more prevalent in the workplace because of computational power to consume data and come up with decisions and guidance. Why not have something there just continually looking at the different options that are available to you? Then finally, the hard one is, what if your boss is an AI agent? So you would think this might be an extreme, but if you work in a call center, if you work in any high transaction environment, especially overseas, you're gonna have an AI boss pretty soon. You're gonna have an AI boss looking at every call log, listening to your phone calls, telling you how to do something better, telling you how to learn something new, managing your performance. There's no reason to have a manager on the call center floor doing that. You can have AI do that. So this is might impact happen in specific segments of the industry, but I think that some of us have to worry about that is, are you okay with having an AI boss? And what does that mean to you personally? So organizational structure and design we have to rethink. We have to think about accountability with individuals. We have to think about leadership training. Okay, are we all sufficiently scared by this yet? There's a lot of things. I'm not giving any solutions to anything, but I do have one thought to conclude on sort of where I think this is going. And actually, it's a very apt place to make this point because of being here at Space Camp. So I think we need to go a little bit back to basics and think about how we educate our children. This is not a solution to the problem today. This is a solution to the problem as it emerges over the next 10, 20 years, is that we may have over-indexed a little bit on STEM. And I say that here with a little bit of controversy because we're, of course, at the hotbed of STEM education, Space Camp. But one thing that makes Space Camp incredibly unique is that it's also an incredible place to build character. And we have to think about how in our education, in K-12 specifically, how we emphasize core skills that help us become better humans. We don't need better programmers. We don't need better machines. We need better humans. And there's a whole set of skills that we humans can do very well that computers can't yet do, like empathy, collaboration, critical thinking. These are things that we still have the domain over. And what we have to think about in the workplace, and this is a call to action for those of us who do work in HR and generally in those areas, is that HRs often think of as human resources, but it will evolve to be about human relationships. And how do we support humans working better with humans and machines to achieve shared objectives and a sense of accomplishment? That's what HR is going to be about. It's not going to be about the things that we deal with today, which is the mechanics of human resources. All right, those are some thoughts. Looking forward to questions. Thank you, everybody.
We'll have a microphone circulating if you have a question. While we're waiting. So I'm curious if from y'all's perspective, good AI is like a haircut, a good haircut. Like, in the workplace, should I notice AI as an employee, or if it's working properly, should I not notice it?
I'm going to go back to the bicycle analogy here, actually. So, which is to say, I think it's a combination of the rider and the tool at their disposal, right? And so I think it, to me, and actually really interesting thinking about a lot of things you were saying in your talk, because a big part is, and actually there's like an old Air Force quote about results are the thing they pay us for. And so at the end of the day, sure, you might notice the haircut, or you might notice the bicycle, or you might notice the eye tool, but I think what would really matter and be noticed is the effectivity or the contributions of a given individual or team. And that's going to take, in the ever-changing world, a solid relationship with AI and good tools to truly be competitive, I think, with others internally and externally. But let's just say it doesn't make the whole thing. So it's just a small data point to add to the picture, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. One thing I sort of worry about, going back to a little bit of the education comment, is are we learning how to discern the difference, right? I think, again, in the workplace, it's pretty easy to suss out who the performers are, you know, who isn't, who you may have made an assumption about, who you believe in, who you don't, who you want to work with, who you don't want to work with. You can make those determinations pretty quickly. in a workplace. It's a little bit harder when you're remote working, but when you're physically in front of people, we humans are pretty good at doing that. We aren't very good at discerning whether a machine is good for that or not. But if that machine has the same influence on us, the same influence on our pay, on our financial well-being, on our careers, how do you evaluate that? I don't know. That's something we have to learn.
Thanks so much. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about employee decision-making processes or just work patterns that are inherently really difficult to capture and measure, partly because they should be. I'm thinking about thinking, right? We've all had the experience in school of teachers saying, show your work, right? And sometimes that's pedagogically really smart. You want to see how they got to the answer. But there are other times where, over the course of a long-term project, if your teacher says, give me the journal where you wrote about it each day, that's busy work, right? And maybe you're not the kind of person for whom that is an efficient or good use of time. Maybe it's actually harmful. Maybe it makes you feel surveilled, right? And apologies because I missed the beginning of your presentation. I know these themes made it in though. So I'm wondering, how do we take, on the one hand, the sort of really strong business pressure for sort of measurement, quantification, optimization, and on the other hand, leave space for employees in particular who are increasingly surveilled, right, to have the opportunity to do things like sit and think about a problem, right, or journal even, or whatever. I think it'll be true for a while that a lot of people will continue to have ways of solving problems, especially at a high level of complexity, that either aren't measurable at all or aren't measurable in the way that their own businesses' systems need them to be measured. And I know that even like that conversation is a start, but I'm wondering if you have any reflections on that.
So I think maybe two kind of responses. One is that I think attribution is going to be a big problem that I talked about a little bit. So just trying to figure out the provenance of an idea, for example, where it originated, who had a role in making it come to life. And again, we deal with this every day. All of us have been in a situation where we've either been the victim or the perpetrator on took that idea and made it my own and said it in a meeting or something like that. Well, what happens when sort of you throw AI in that mix, and is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Certainly, we have to ask the question, and maybe it doesn't matter. For I think many work environments, as you said, the output matters. It doesn't really matter how you got there. I do think that I think one of the most effective areas for AI today, and we're using this in my organization, is as a sparring partner, so to speak, when it comes to brainstorming and collaboration. In fact, just in producing these slides, that was me talking to ChatGPT, just having a conversation over several days, trying to figure out sort of how to think about putting this talk together. I could have paid somebody to do that. I could have had somebody on my team do that with me, and instead I just did it with ChatGPT for $20 a month. And so, that's a very powerful tool for any worker to have. And I think when we think about the idea of, we want humans to spend more time thinking, that's not a solitary thing anymore. That is going to be something you do with AI.
I really like that idea of using it as a part of the thinking process. I'm still learning how to do that, I'll be honest. But another place that I think actually kind of addresses your question is AI has the opportunity and is really good at doing repetitive things also, right? And what that tends to lend itself to is the potential for more opportunity to be creative. And so actually, my partner is an artist, and so I've learned this process a little bit, and she's kind of taught me, but the creativity takes space. It takes mental space for it, right? And when you're totally fried at the end of a workday, when you've been sitting in a spreadsheet hell all day long, been doing a lot of that recently, it's really hard to be creative. And when AI is able to take care of some of those repetitive tasks for you, and leave some of that space for creativity, I think it can actually be an indirect amplifier and actually really give people opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise to make an impact. And so I think we might actually see a little bit of a change in just that value of creativity in the workspace as well.
Or the opposite, when you spend the whole day in a spreadsheet and you need to make a creative dinner, you have ChatGPT figure out what to make a creative dinner.
Fair enough.
Potato, potato.
Do you have any thoughts on, as you're talking about in the workplace, how perhaps an AI agent or working with AI could become more commonplace? The difference between creating a tool and humanizing the AI, would there ever be, in your opinion, a point where if we anthropomorphize the AI too much, that you could give credit to the AI mistakenly, or the AI itself would attempt to take credit for its own work?
So I think AI taking credit for its own work, I think that requires a level of autonomy that we probably don't have yet, or there's restrictions in many of these agents to try to do that. But, I can always imagine if you loosen up the strings a little bit, that it could send an email to somebody, and if you've told it to send an email, it will do that, and it could always say, like, I take credit for this. I think that the idea that we, again, attribute ideas and work to AI, I think that has to start to become part of our lexicon, where you start to acknowledge that something that was done by, in fact, I think in many ways clients in whatever industry that you're in are going to require it. We're in the insurance and benefits industry. A lot of what we do is provide guidance to employers and employees on what to do about insurance and other topics. If that guidance is generated by AI, we're going to have to convey that that was the case, right? And we're not shying away from that. We just think it's a powerful capability for us to have. But I think that the consumer has to say, look, I really want to know whether this was made by AI or not.
I think we also have to ask ourselves the question of, could the AI have done it without the human interaction? Yeah. And so what is the value of that component also? And I don't know, mentally, I don't think I've transgressed the human emotional point yet to be able to give credit, so to speak, to AI, but I think I can at least give credit to the human interaction that helps bring it to that solution.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth thinking about this in the context of like how you interact with the AI, because most of us are sort of not quite there yet in thinking about it. But just to give you sort of it's not so hypothetical. This is happening today in many organizations. If you use Microsoft Teams or use Slack or whatever sort of messaging system, you could have a group chat room, right, where you have multiple team members working together to service a client or on a project. That a couple of those team members are AI, right, and those two team members are conversing with you as if they were a real person. And many of us have work from home arrangements or remote work arrangements, and so we don't actually physically see the people anyways very often. And so they are interacting with us through chat and eventually video and voice in a way that seems like they're human, and that you could ask them questions and you could have them go do things for you, and they could interrogate or ask you questions. At that point in time, it's real, right? Like I said earlier, it may not, in your head, okay, this is AI, it's just whatever, right? But at a certain point in time, you're going to forget, right? And at a certain point in time, it's going to be so normal to you that you're not going to think twice about it. And I think about when that happens, when we cross over that lexicon, where it becomes this thing that you just always have, and we build it into our lives and our language. What happens then? I think we're not that far away from that. I think that many companies are experimenting with that today.
I think the only other thought I'd add to that is who bears the responsibility of the outcome, right? So, for example, if I was a responsible engineer still in the space world, and AI was my teammate working this, and AI did 80% of the, we'll call work, but that $300 million spacecraft blew up, or that person died, or whatever happened there. Who bears the responsibility at the end of the day? And people like to point at other reasons of why something happened. But at the end of the day, the human, in my opinion, should still be held responsible for making sure that the AI gave the correct response, that it was a solution that they, had something behind it, could be trusted. And at least in my mind, from like a managerial standpoint of my team, like that is something I would give my team credit for, not the AI tools that they were using.
Yeah, I mean, it's a more benign example, but you're a financial advisor, right? So we have hundreds of financial advisors that work for us. They manage people's 401k plans. What if they're deciding to do things in your 401k plan that are AI generated? You have the fiduciary duty, not just sort of the moral duty. You have a legal obligation to be looking out in the best interests of your client. And what happens when AI is part of that? So these are not answers to anything. They're just careful questions for us to consider.
That theme has come up a couple different times in your presentations and in the questions, who owns the work product? And do you have a sense for how employees are feeling about their work product? I mean, a lot of creatives like your partner are used to owning their work product, but in our world in finance, I make something, I do something, and the business owns it. Do you have a sense for how how that dynamic's changing a little bit with AI?
Honestly, I don't think we've hit the point with anyone that I'm working with where it's changed much. It's still thought of as the bicycle, so to speak, but they're the ones winning the Tour de France. But I do love the kind of the mind-opening state that you've introduced here a little bit on how that could change at some point.
Yeah, again, it's sort of a non-answer to your question, but I think that I'm going to say is that I think we all take pride in our work. Right, I think that's a common human characteristic. I think that we have to change our relationship with pride and work, and because I do think that that's going to be something that will have to evolve. I'll also take credit for the younger generation. I'm older now, but younger generation, just where it's going to be natural, right? Like you could have asked the same question when people started to use spreadsheets and word processors and any sort of digital device that, was it really them who created the work? And I think you wouldn't question that today. Of course I did, right? So I think that at a certain point in time, we're not going to question that. And I think we're going to still take pride in what we do as humans. I think the nature of what we do will change.
I do have a quick question, and it's along the lines of Andrew there. Do you foresee AI taking a holistic evaluation? Would it be able to gather, I mean, we all work with teams. Would it be able to gather enough metrics to make an evaluation, especially as in a team setting, especially because a lot of decisions are made by different situations? Would it be able to gather all of it and create a proper evaluation when, there's so many different things outside of just an individual contributor? Do you foresee something like that taking place, especially when it comes to evaluations and promotions and things like that?
Yes, 100%, absolutely. I think, in fact, in some ways, that's happening already today in different industries. If you work in finance or you work in a very technical industry where the metrics are clear, the outcomes are easily measured, that yes, machines are helping do evaluation. I think there's a domain of evaluation that has been more difficult that now it's getting possible for AI to address, which is, again, how well people work together. If a project delivered on time or not on time, who was at fault, who performed, who went the extra mile, who didn't. You would have a sense that a good leader would know that, right? But would a good leader rely on AI to help them figure that out? Yes. And I think the question to ask yourself as a worker, do you want that, right? It certainly depends on what side of that question you're on. If you're the underperformer or the overperformer. If you're the overperformer, you want that. If you're under, you don't, right? And so I think those are just concepts that we have to think about. I think it becomes really challenging when it results in like your bonus being determined by the AI completely. And there's much more severe, dangerous areas where AI with facial recognition in criminal justice, for example, is causing a lot of havoc. But in a more benign case, whether you got that, maybe not benign for you, but whether you got that promotion or not is dependent on AI accurately representing your contribution to a project. I don't think that we're far away at all from that.
I think also, like, part of your question was about enough data, right? And I think quantitatively, AI has the opportunity to go through far more data than a manager or really any of us could do, right? Where I might see the challenges is the weighting and the qualitative aspects of that data, or the response to missing data that wasn't included in its scan. So some examples of that would be, I get on one of my teammates because I'm like, hey, why the heck isn't this done, right? And it turns out they haven't gotten their part done because 2 teams down the line haven't gotten the part they need to them, and they've been doing everything they can to facilitate that other team. But at some point, they've literally done everything, raised it up. In fact, they brought it up to me before, I've forgotten, whatever. They have done everything in their power, and they're blocked, right? And they're doing other things, but that would potentially not be a piece of data that might filter its way in, depending on what data is available. So I think, and also there just could be circumstances where AI might come back with a certain analysis, but when we look at the feedback, the weighting of certain items in our mind of what truly was a game changer or was a contributor in the overall impact of the company or strategy or kind of bigger level picture from more of a holistic data standpoint, less in the specific, just quantity, but a holistic view might change that. And so I guess I would hope that there continues to be human scrutiny, I guess, on any results that are put out.
Yeah, I think the human scrutiny is essential. And I just give you a more benign example. If how many of us have been on Zoom calls where you turn off your camera just because you're just not quite there today, right? Well, if you had AI evaluating your contribution to a meeting, that's a little unfair, right? Because it's got to look at the holistic lens of what you are doing, not just the day that you didn't feel like turning on your camera and stayed a little quiet in the meeting. We've all been there. And so that weighting concept has to be built in. And again, you would want a human boss to be able to sort of evaluate that for you, where AI could look at their hard metrics and say that, well, their camera was off, so they clearly weren't involved in that meeting. So I think, yes, the human sort of integration of this has to be in place.
I am a communications professional, so this is a subject that is somewhat terrifying to those of us as your partner in communications and media. I saw on LinkedIn just this morning, in fact, it said, skilled writers earn up to $25 an hour teaching AI how to write better. And I thought, why the heck would I do that? So, I think for people like me who've made my entire career out of communication, the idea that this concept of AI could come in and replace the ability to communicate for a company is very scary and displacing. It's a sense of displacement. And so could you talk to that a little bit about how this technology is going to move forward? Because I can see, it's already a soft skill that's not always valued in corporations. It's one that's cut frequently. If something's got to go, it's oftentimes that. So how do companies understand, or how do we help companies understand the value of the discernment that a professional communicator can bring to the mix?
Yeah, it's always comms and L&D. They're the first ones to go.
Exactly.
So I think we do need to separate, it's a common question around sort of career paths and job profiles and what's going to change. And I do think we need to separate domain and scale, right? So I think the scale of work in corporate communications, for example, or as I talked about in learning and development, I think that's changing. And that train's left the station. There's nothing we can do about that. The amount of people that you need to develop corporate communications to do the work, that scale has changed. You might have needed one person for every 1,000 employees. Well, now it's one person for every 10,000 employees, because that one person is so much more effective, or let's not say effective, so much more scalable than before with the use of AI. The domain of communications has to be in place. And what I mean by that is that humans know how to communicate and convey ideas to other humans better than anybody else. We are still on the receiving end of this. And so I think that the presence of communications professionals has to still be there. Similarly in HR or in learning and development and other sort of corporate jobs. But it is scary. Like again, if you were to just look at our education system, are we raising too many people in certain job types that are not going to have that availability for jobs because the scale is changing? And I would argue things like engineering and computer science, the scales have changed. It's dramatically different, and naturally would be the early adopters of this stuff, that we don't need as many computer scientists as we think that we've needed in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. The main part I think I'd add is, again, who bears the responsibility? And so the impact of a particular communications individual or writer, I think that gets magnified, right? So magnified by the scale of the amount of communications they can likely handle. But at the end of the day, someone still has to make sure that what is put out there is correct for consumption, and is most likely going to be tweaking and changing things. And someone has to bear that responsibility of what goes out the door. I think it was last week, Air Canada was held liable for a lawsuit because their chatbot gave incorrect information. So that's actually an area that I think could almost grow for communications in a way, is an auditing aspect on things like automated communications and chatbots, not just like generating a message like I was alluding to earlier of, hey, this particular system's down, 1% of merchants might be affected. Like, that's a pretty easy piece of communication that someone's just making sure us engineers aren't being idiots on putting something out to the public sphere. But, and the chatbots being the idiot to 1,000 people, that's a big impact. And that's gonna take someone that's probably helping train that as well. So probably auditing, mass communications, but also making sure that the small ones are trained appropriately could be a new opportunity.
Kind of building off of the responsibility point, and that may kind of be what you were just now saying, do you see there being an expectation that people take the time that AI has saved them to then reinvest and check the AI's work and be like, okay, cool, I've done this in 1/5 the time, the other 4/5 are going to be making sure you did it right?
Humans are lazy. I think it's going to take a degree of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to take a degree of like diligence that's going to have to be trained into us, honestly. Right, but I mean, we probably all were late for a homework assignment at some point in elementary school and copied someone's work, right? And then we also got the A- instead of the A or the B+ or whatever it was because that person screwed it up. Like, come on, probably 90% of us did that. But anyhow, it's the same case here in the AI front, right? Like, if you just copy it and go directly with it, I think it's an opportunity to maybe take responsibility for something you shouldn't have. And so there's a level of discipline that I think people are going to have to also learn when accepting an AI response over time that is going to be pretty critical.
Yeah, I would agree that the short answer is no, they're not going to spend 4/5 of their time checking anything. We don't do that anyways. When you Google something, like we just believe what we see. You might check it once, but you kind of go from there. So I do think that that is going to be a sort of predominant issue. I guess what I'm worried a little bit is all the mistakes that we're going to make along the way as people figure out how to do that and how severe those mistakes are to themselves. And again, there's a lot of things we have to worry about within the public sphere, but certainly within the workplace, people are going to trip up a lot. And so what we worry about a lot of my company is sort of helping ourselves and our clients, who are largely employers, sort of figure out how to deal with that and to train their employees to provide the right safeguards in place so that the mistakes that are made as we go through this journey aren't so severe.
Yeah, the idea isn't that it takes the same amount of time, but at least you make sure you put the time in there, right?
So you mentioned earlier that at some point, we're probably not quite there yet, but at some point, a lot of us will be interacting on Teams or Slack with AI, and as things progress and it becomes more difficult to discern who's on the other side of that, I can probably foresee at some point those interactions being named to make us feel better as employees, Chad or Steve or something else, right? And so at some point then, there could exist the possibility of bosses, as you mentioned, relying on Steve for evaluations. Are there things that we need to be doing as employers or bosses now to mitigate any sort of antagonistic relationship between Steve the AI and Steve the human?
In that we would get them mixed up, or in that?
In that Steve the human or other employees may have an antagonistic view of, I shouldn't have used the same Steve, right? So Chad's human, Steve is not. Steve's the bot or whatever you want to call it on there. The boss relies on Steve to help with evals and other things. That could very easily create a situation where employees develop an antagonistic.
Try to unplug Steve.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I got it.
Or Hal. I should use the word Hal, right?
So I'll unpack a few things on that. So I think first thing, the personification of these things, like I mentioned, we're deploying this stuff. There's many companies that are doing it. I think that many will decide to personify them just because it's more natural. I think that at least in a Teams or Slack environment, you could have a sort of a user interface cue that kind of tells you that this is AI generated, but ultimately they'll look and feel like humans on there. So I think that's going to happen anyways. I think the idea that a boss is going to prefer to work with, let's give a more direct example. Steve, the performance coach in HR, or Susan, the actual performance coach in HR. Steve's the AI, Susan's a real person. And does the boss prefer to work with Steve because she's just easier to work with when it comes to coaching employees and providing assistance? I think, yes, the boss will definitely prefer to do that. We're natural. We're just going to gravitate to the easiest thing possible. Will it create a sense of, that's what I sort of talked about. It's a great point to add to the slides, but it really is what I'm worried about when it comes to culture, is that when you have these personified bots out there within your culture representing you, representing the work that you do, interacting with your own employees, forget about your clients, what does that mean to the culture of the organization? I worry about that because, again, I think culture is something so, like you know it and you don't know it, right? It's very hard to describe it and to create it, and when it's great, it's magical, but it can get destroyed by a few bad actors. We all have those toxic employees, right? What if you have toxic AI that's destroying your culture? Like, I think those are things we really have to think about.
We've used AI recently a lot in reference to Teams, right? Like, not Microsoft Teams, but actually being a team member. And your question actually made me wonder if that's actually misconstrued. And what I mean by that is a good culture or a good team takes a level of empathy. And as humans, we're able to do that. But also as humans, I don't think we've evolved yet, and I'm curious if we will, to be able to think of a machine having empathy back. And so no matter almost what that machine would say, it's always going to feel like a programmed response, right? It can't feel the way you're feeling, at least not anywhere near where we're at now. And so, again, as that standpoint, can it really be a true team member? And I think that actually could, in your case of Hal and Chad, or Steve and Chad, definitely, hopefully have the boss value Chad a little bit more, just as an individual, but also honestly could lead to some of those issues with Chad and the chatbot, because if the chatbot is unable to have that piece of empathy in the team, then it really can't be a true team member.
I think one important point to make is, and I agree with what you just said, Rob, that one way to mitigate all of this is to change the interface between the human and the AI, right? The reason that this becomes such a predominant issue in the workforce is because the interface is chat. It's conversational, right? And as I said earlier, if the conversation fools you enough or makes you less skeptical or less attuned to whether you're talking to AI or not, and sort of just that issue fades into the background, and now you're just having a conversation with somebody, something, then it creates a lot of these challenges, right? But if the AI just spat back at you graphs, right, and infographics and charts and tables, so you're not going to think that that's a human. Wow, you created that infographic in 30 seconds. That's crazy. So you're going to know that you're working with a computer, but it could still convey the outcome that you're looking for. I just think that addresses some of the problems, but I do think that we're so used to in work culture, and I think this is just something that needs to be noted. 15 years ago, the concept of like chatting with people online all day was not a thing in the workplace, right? You certainly did it in other environments, but chat in the workplace is very common. Blame it on Slack, blame it on Microsoft Teams, whatever. But if that is so common, whether it's chat or email correspondence, that is the thing that this AI is really good at mimicking humans on, right? And that's where we're going to fall into a lot of these traps. And so I think we just have to think carefully about when we deploy chat as the interface and still have the same systems, but generate a more less human sort of interaction medium.
You know, I wonder what the human response would be if you're deployed in chat and you don't know it's a chatbot, right? So if we don't put that identifier that makes it clear, and you feel like you form a relationship with this, and then, hey, let's go meet at the coffee bar today. And you find out you've been having this in-depth conversation with a chatbot. I mean, honestly, I almost wonder if it's going to have a pretty...
I'm pretty sure there's some dudes in the basement already having
yeah,
that problem.
but like, and to that point, I mean, what does that do from like a negative personal response and even our own human interactions and value of others, right? Definitely exactly.
You know, it is... It has, and thank you for bringing that up because, you know, again, we joke about this, but these are real fundamental challenges in human behavior and psyche. And, you know, I think, and going back to the question on pride of your work, right? I think a lot of people value themselves through what they do, the output that they put in the world. And if it's hard for you to take, to take pride in that you don't know if you really did it or not, what is that going to do to your psyche? What is that going to do to your own self-esteem, right? I think that these are just, again, tough topics to dig into, but, we tend to talk about some of the extremes, like, somebody chatting with something they think is a human and then be like, and there's more sort of things in the middle here that are actually going to be more commonplace that I think we have to start to explore.
Thank you.